Honor him. Welcome back. It is News and Views on Salam Media with me, Julie Ali. The time is exactly 14 after 8, and we have as our first guest on the show this morning, I had indicated that earlier on, is the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane. And of course, we are going to be talking their manifesto, the upcoming elections, what he thinks the landscape's going to look like, his thoughts on coalitions, and much, much more. A very good morning to you, Mmusi Maimane. Welcome to the program. Lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you. Good morning to fellow South Africans. Thank you so much for having us on your show.
Exciting times ahead of us. The elections are a couple of months away and it's all systems go. Undoubtedly, you and your party are in readiness for the big event. So tell us a little bit about Build One South Africa. How hopeful are you regarding, the votes that you're going to garner? And I also see that there have been promises made by your party regarding the employment situation. Is that going to be doable in the current economic situation? But I have thrown a whole host of questions to you. I will wait for you to now respond.
Sure. I mean, the first and most crucial thing is that the biggest crisis facing South Africa at the moment is the fact that too many people don't work.
Mm,
And in all reality, when you look at what this election is about, it's about the choice for jobs or not for jobs. It's whether South Africans will remain poor or where they can prosper. That's why we've made it a central focus of everything in this election, which is to put a job in every home. It's about making sure that actually in 40% of the households in this country where citizens do not have a single income coming into that house, whether that, and it's only dependent on remittances and welfare, that we put a
mm,
job in every home. Now, to your question, it seems like the conditions make that hard. Actually, no. Our neighboring countries are growing rates higher than us. And it tells you that it's something that is endogenous to South Africa. So the first thing that's crucial to do is about making sure that we fix Eskom and keep the lights on, because no economy is going to grow without electricity. That's about it, mixing up the energy mix, not believing that Eskom can be the sole provider of energy, and introducing build, own, operate models, so that we could keep a base load, so that we don't have to suffer from load shedding, because that destroys manufacturing. It destroys
mm,
jobs. It means if you run a factory, you can't keep employing people. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to fix our transport logistics. The reality of it is that our ports have failed, which severely impacts our export market and import market. So there are a whole lot of goods that are sitting on the coastline of KZN where literally they can't come into the country because the ports are broken. But the second thing is we've got to fix the transport of people, not just of goods. So you don't have rail infrastructure. So people are spending 40% of their income
mm.
literally getting to and from work. So we've got to fix for trains and make it easier for people to get to and from work. Thirdly, we've got to skill people for jobs. When young people are uneducated, they are not going to be employable. That's a fact of life. And so if they are passing at 30%, which is what this government tells them they must, it means that they are setting them up for unemployment. And then lastly, let's make sure that actually our country is safe, because when people are being murdered, no investment is going to come to South Africa, and it makes it harder for people to get jobs.
So, Musi, lots of newer parties that are coming onto the scene. The DA is making huge promises. The ANC, as we know, also continue to say, give us another opportunity and we will fix things in the country. Everything you've touched on is what is going to make the country work, is what we need. But thus far, I think other leaders have promised similar or the same as you are promising. I think the important thing here is the deliverable. How are you going to deliver? We know the story with Eskom. We have a newly appointed minister whom everybody was very hopeful about delivering. And of course, we've seen what's happened there, and the situation with our ports, road infrastructure, etc., etc. And I think underlying all of that is the large scale corruption in the country. So I'm wondering how Mmusi Maimane and Build One South Africa is going to forge ahead and start fixing these huge challenges that we face in South Africa.
I think it's worthwhile reminding ourselves that when we put together coalitions in 2016 in Johannesburg, Tshwane, and Ekurhuleni, indicators were showing the fact that those municipalities were improving in standards of living. So the first thing is you bring experience, because many people, new parties, all of the people bring they bring no experience to governance. And secondly, when you look at people like the ANC, we know what the ANC has done. So I think we mustn't get ourselves trapped into believing that the ANC is doing everything it could do. It's just as if there's climate that they can't operate in. They are making choices that keep load shedding on. They have made decisions to do that. They want load shedding because it suits them. It allows them to offer contracts to people who are politically connected to them for the purposes of corruption. So the ANC is the father of load shedding. We mustn't think load shedding is an accident of nature. It happens because the government makes particular decisions. Now, what I'm trying to suggest to you is that we can take different decisions and eradicate load shedding. We can reduce demand by allowing people to build and operate and come into that. So the second last thing I'd want to say is that my experience has showed me that even since having left Parliament, we've been a government in working. I've been in communities where communities don't have water, or we're installing boreholes in other communities. We've installed water tanks because we recognize that water is a human right. So we went and worked with people to do that. And then lastly, I think at the very least, having even been in public service and now having served in the private sector, you've got to be able to indicate, which is a low bar, where is the ethical leadership in this country? The people that we've got elected at the moment have been implicated, some of them, in Zondo Commission. And therefore, if we elect people who are corrupt, we're going to end up in a where more and more corruption will thrive.
So, Mmusi, are you not concerned about pushback? You talk about coalitions. We've seen and see what is happening currently in Gauteng. I mean, it was quite a comedy of errors when we saw all of those musical chairs happening with the change of mayors every few months. We had a new mayor in place. That does directly point to the fact that there's corruption going on, or it's all about control and power. Certain parties are wanting to control key positions, and they want those powerful positions. So how, if you, once the elections are over and you need to go into coalition, which I think most smaller parties are going to have to go that route, how are you going to then, your party, going to ensure that we don't have a situation of musical chairs, that we don't have corrupt officials, corrupt, politicians, etc.? You are going to get pushback on all of those issues, are you not?
When we formed coalitions in 2016, Herman Mashaba remained mayor of Joburg till 2019. I don't have an experience of revolving doors of mayors. Actually, what I've been able to do is been able to work with other parties to ensure that when we have a plan, we communicate it to the public and we hold ourselves accountable to that public every single time. We've been able to show that over a long period of time, we're able to keep stability and keep development. So experience matters here. And secondly, I think we mustn't make this debate big versus small parties. I think we must make it old and new. Because old ideas, just because a party's got members and all of that sort of stuff, and doesn't mean it's got new ideas. Actually, that's part of the problem with our country, that we're living in a world where these old parties I keep practicing old technologies, old ideas, old ways of thinking. You almost would feel that because so many of our leaders grew up under apartheid, that their thinking is still modeled on that. We have to bring a new generation of leaders who will think about a different future. That's why in Build One South Africa, we've gone out of our way to invite people from communities to come and represent the people in parliament. And so that they are able to bring governance that's new. People who are not steeped in politics, right? Deputy Leader Nobuntu and many others come from the private sector, come from business. These are citizens who for them, public service is not political careerism. It's about them serving the people. So they've come on board to be able to serve their communities. And I think it introduces a new leadership cohort for the future.
So when you talk about a new leadership cohort for the future, is it fair to then perhaps suggest that the word cadre deployment will no longer feature in our vocabulary here in South Africa, and that with parties like yourself and other smaller, strong parties are possibly going to form coalitions and topple the ANC? What are your predictions and your thoughts on that?
No party is going to get over 50%, and that includes the ANC. So that's a positive for South Africa. Secondly, I think the idea, I mean, even the word cadre deployment, the word cadre is so historic, Marxist, tells you that it's an old way of thinking. It moves away from the idea of the professionalization of the civil service, making sure that the best work. If you want to make appointments in the public service, you need a public service commission that prescribes to say, in this entity, you need a water engineer. Or anyone you appoint must have a water engineering qualification. The difficulty that we've seen, let alone all the issues of cadre deployment, is that whilst the prescriptions, i.e. ESCOM, says we need someone who can work with an electrical engineer or someone who can focus on building a power plant, we've appointed people who don't know anything about electricity. So you end up with this mismatch of skills. We've got to ensure that there's a skills program, a development in the public service, introduce better accountability and continuous assessment of the public service. And then, but ultimately, we've got to ensure that in building a very strong and a capable government, you always make sure that this idea that people think public service is just their part-time occupation, their full-time occupation is to make money elsewhere, i.e., if a president wants to sell buffalo in their spare time or in their main time, it shows that actually you've got other private endeavors. So why are we surprised when the Home Affairs official says, well, the system can be down because actually my main business is making sure I can offer services to other citizens just to make it quicker. Or when the policeman says, I'll do other private security work instead of serving full-time at the police station, or a teacher does something else. These are the problems of poor leadership that show when you make the state your side hustle. So we've got to return to professionalization, strong leadership that ensures that it brings capability into the state.
Okay, then the big question is the how, and the pushback. I have asked the question earlier on. You know, the lead up to elections normally, we do have all of these promises. We become very hopeful as citizens, and we kind of hang on to every positive thing a politician tells us, in the hope of garnering our votes. My big question is the how, and who will build one South Africa then decide to go into coalitions with? Whom do you feel is closely or the closest aligned to your principles and your manifesto to make a huge difference? But before you respond to that, can I ask you to please hold on for a minute or two? We do need to go for an ad break. Can you please stay with us?
Sure, for a few more minutes, yeah.
Thank you indeed.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Send food and send kindness to those who have lost their homes and have been plunged into poverty. For those who are a meal away from starvation, a food parcel means an entire family can eat this Ramadan. That's the power of food. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
With so many investment options today, it's only natural that you might feel a little confused which route to take. Should I buy shares or should I invest in gold bullion? Randery Jewelers now brings you the Zahab coin, an alternative to the Kruger Rand. The Zahab coin, a solid wealth protector in its purest form of 24-karat gold, is the safest way to protect your wealth. So don't just sit there and watch your paper money depreciate. Change to gold. Call Randery Jewelers now at 031 202 4701 or visit www.rjcoin.co.za, situated at 151 Essenwood Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Our first guest is Mmusi Maimane. He is the leader of Build One South Africa. And of course, they are promising much. They seem to be going straight to the heart of the matter, and that is addressing the unemployment situation in our country. And we do know that if that is not tackled and addressed ASAP, our crime levels are going to continue to spiral. Corruption will continue to spiral, and it's going to be a bleak future for South Africa if we don't fix those situations. And as you heard, as we all seem to use the same mantra, and that is fix Eskom, fix the road, Transnet, fix SAA, fix all of those service, those SOEs that is supposed to serve the country, which have been pillaged and plunged almost to a point of being unworkable. So here's a leader who's come up to say, we are going to create jobs. And I've asked the all-important question, how? Welcome back, Mmusi Maimane. And the big question, how are you going to tackle this? It's a huge, huge undertaking.
Absolutely. And we're not, that's why I think the first starting point is fix the education and fix the capability of government. And whilst, so the first thing that you got to do is make sure that the direct elections bill is passed, which makes it possible for you to directly elect people. Because the reason corruption spikes is because politicians don't fear the people. They think that they can walk around because the only people they fear is the party. So what we've got to do is make sure that actually people can come through and directly elect people. And that's how BOSA has gone out to even go into communities and empower them. Secondly, begin a sense upon which you capacitate the public service, as I've indicated earlier, as to how it appoints people, that you hire the best for the state. Because without the best tools, you can't play the best game, as it were. So you've got to ensure that that's fixed. And then thirdly, if you can begin to change the laws, the regulatory framework that makes it easier for people to invest, for people to be able to build their factories, you can win. Eskom, for example, as one to fix. You've highlighted it. If you increase just through a process of signing a proclamation that allows people to build, own, operate, you could literally eradicate load shedding within 2 years as a function of going, let big energy consumers, mining, etc., you take them off the grid, you allow them to build, own, operate, so that they themselves are the ones who are able to say, look, this particular aspect of government can be able to be taken off the grid, and they can be able to lease operations and sell them back to the grid at a later period. That is an immediate fix that can happen in 2 years. The government won't do it because they've bankrupted Eskom. Now they have to recoup those costs and make sure that they protect their own people who work there.
Okay, two final questions before I let you go. We do value your time on the show this morning. We're very pleased that you're able to join us. The issue around the DA in the Western Cape. It seems from what we're reading, hearing, and seeing around us is the Western Cape has almost been split right down the middle. You have the haves and the have-nots. And of course, the richer suburbs and the richer communities are being provided all of the services because, of course, they can pay for it. In the meantime, the townships and the poorest of the poor are suffering. They are just not being serviced at all. How fair is that game? We're also hearing that the DA is planning on setting up a little Tel Aviv or little Israel in the Western Cape because it seems to be attracting semigration to that part of the country, and they're also encouraging Israelis from all around the world to come and resettle in the Western Cape. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the issue of inequality is universal, and it's universal in South Africa. I mean, you've got right next to Sandton, you've got Alexandra. So yes, this question of, that's why we as Build One South Africa are very strong at saying, how do we invest 200 billion rands in townships and communities so that we can build that inclusive economy? That's got to be the focus, and ensure that the rights of all citizens can prosper in this nation. Part of the historical injustice that we face in this country is that it hasn't parties. Part of the reason some of us even left is because we were very clear about the fact that we've got to address these injustices and build an inclusive economy. I can't comment on all the other issues that you raise, re the DA. I think the DA is best equipped to answer those questions. It's not mine is to fight for South Africa that prospers for all, and whether that's in the Western Cape or in Gauteng, that remains the mission.
Okay, it's going to be very interesting to see how things do play out. Up until a couple of weeks ago, it was almost the writing was almost on the wall that the ANC is probably going to be taking a hiding as far as the upcoming elections are concerned. But I think the fact that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Naledi Pandor, and the ANC government took Israel to the ICJ, I think is a huge win for the ANC. And I'm thinking, I'm not a politician, you'd be best to answer that. I'm thinking on the back of their win at the ICJ, that they probably going to garner even more votes because of their support of the genocide in Palestine.
Well, I think that the South African citizens must be able to make a decision upon, because the atrocities taking place in the Middle East are quite devastating. And I think the judgment is asking for a thorough investigation into the issue. And I think that we need to cease violence in there. I certainly believe, without a fear of contradiction, the idea that peaceful, negotiated transition that gets to a two-state solution is the best solution going forward in that region. That, when it comes to issues of South Africa and where it goes, equally so, we must be careful, because there's always a sense of baked-in hypocrisy that sometimes comes through when the ANC is very selective about which cases it chooses and which ones it doesn't. For example, it has also protected other people who have murdered fellow Africans in the same continent, and the ANC is associated with it. So I think we need to be careful on that issue, and crucially realize that as we head into this election and where it goes, South Africa has influence in what happens in the Middle East, but we've also got influence in what must happen here in South Africa. And I think we could, on one issue, vote for them, but realize the fact that South Africa domestically, the ANC is going to wreck this country. And that in some ways is part of the choice metric that we have to make as citizens, to realize that for us to be strong, in order to support people all over the world for all the various causes, we have to be strong at home to make sure that our country is functioning well. And I'm convinced there is reason why we're working to remove the ANC is because ultimately they're the ones who've looted for us and left citizens poor. That's the fact of the reality of what we face up to.
My final question. In the dark days of apartheid, Nelson Mandela himself said it, that South Africa will never be free if Palestine isn't free. And yet we believe that on SAFM, on the Stephen Groote show, you were said to, and I quote, "I don't believe that Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine." And I kind of wonder why you made those remarks. What we see and hear, what's happening in Palestine, is an absolute atrocity. You can't believe that one group of human beings are perpetrating this on another set of human beings. It is unbelievable. Hospitals being bombed, people being, deprived of critical aid, food, medicines, water, your basic human right, water. Aid trucks are not allowed to cross over the Rafah crossing. It is just absolutely unimaginable. And we hear that you have said, I don't believe, I quote, "I don't believe that Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine." You're a very strong political figure, and I would have liked to have heard something different from you.
No, I think, let me bring clarity. Again, I've highlighted that there's a genuine need for a two-state solution. I've highlighted that the question was framed to me about that court's judgment. And the court's judgment said there's a prima facie case for investigation into the acts of genocide, and that Israel must take all actions that it can to eliminate the prospect of that happening. That's what the judgment said. So I'm not the judge in the issue. I'm merely reflecting on what the judgment has said and have called for a peaceful transition. Part of that is the ceasing of violence. It's the opening of all channels so that basic services can be provided in a war, in a conflict, and ultimately that we bring all parties to a negotiated settlement so that we can bring about a transition. I stand on that because I think of Palestinians to exist must be upheld, but I also think that the rights of Israelis to exist must also be upheld. So I think that's why a two-state solution, still to me, has always been at the forefront of of what we should be driving for, regardless of how difficult it is.
Mmusi Maimane, the leader of World One South Africa, thank you indeed for your insights, your thoughts, and the upcoming elections in South Africa. Do appreciate your time. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much.
It is exactly 8:41. News and views on Salam Media. And next up, we're going to be talking with Naren Ganesh.